Hello and welcome back to Strawberry Ink, the podcast where we dive deep into the chilling details of some of the most unsettling true crime cases. I'm your host, Santiago, and today we'll be talking about a crime that took place at a Waffle House in Nashville, Tennessee. A tragedy that left 4 people dead and many others scared for life. But as we explore the events surrounding the shooting, we'll also uncover the disturbing behaviors and warning signs of the predator, Travis Reinking, who spent years showing troubling signs of violence and paranoia before his deadly actions. Reinking's journey toward violence didn't begin the day of the shooting, and his history paints a picture of an individual with a growing sense of delusion, instability, and anger. Travis Reinking, born in 1989, appeared to be an unremarkable individual at first glance. Raised in rural Illinois, he had a history of legal troubles and mental health issues, though they were often overlooked or dismissed by those around him. What became clear over time is that he exhibited signs of escalating paranoia and delusions. In 2017, Travis Reinking was arrested by the Secret Service after he trespassed on the grounds of the White House, claiming that he wanted to speak with President Trump. The bizarre incident was one of the first clear indications of his delusional thinking. His obsession with the president didn't end there. Reinking began to believe that he was somehow being persecuted by the government. These delusions only intensified as time went on. Travis's behavior became more erratic as the months passed. He exhibited signs of dangerous paranoia, and in 2018, after a string of bizarre incidents, his own family became concerned for his well-being. They attempted to intervene. Travis's father, apparently not grasping the severity of his son's behavior, later admitted to giving Travis his firearms back after they had been confiscated. This was despite a history of concerning behavior, his obsession with being persecuted, and an alarming display of anger towards the police. One disturbing incident that stands out was when Travis claimed that the police were harassing him and that they were part of some government conspiracy. He even made threats of violence, which seemed to go unnoticed by the authorities. Now, let's get started. In 2017, the year started off with Travis going to the Tremont swimming pool in Illinois in a pink women's housecoat. The bottom part of the housecoat came off, and Travis started exposing his private parts. The pool's lifeguard asked him to come out of the pool. He obeyed and shouted at the lifeguard, "I'm a man." He then continued on to expose his private parts to the lifeguard. The police were called, but failed to identify him, and no action was taken. The pool's administration forgave Travis and chose not to pursue criminal charges for this. Then on that summer, there was an incident involving him that occurred at his residence. On the top floor of a building where his father, Jeffrey Reinking, had a crane rental business, Travis came downstairs out of his Morton, Illinois apartment, wearing a pink dress. He made a scene in the business's reception office while holding a rifle, and then tossed the rifle in his pickup truck before driving away. The police got called, but once again, Travis was forgiven and there were no charges. He had as well committed no severe crime. Travis was having delusions, claiming that pop singer Taylor Swift was harassing him and had hacked into his Netflix account. He approached a Morton police officer in a parking lot and requested to make a report against Taylor Swift for stalking. This report was then discarded. However, the Morton Police Department did start expressing concerns regarding Travis Reinking's mental health. According to him, Taylor Swift had asked him to meet at the roof of a Morton Dairy Queen. Travis obeyed and got on this roof. However, Taylor wasn't even there, yet another delusion. The restaurant staff was concerned about Travis's safety, so they called the cops. Travis then got off the roof when police arrived and explained what had been happening. They then let him go once his family came to pick him up. In July of 2017, Travis went to Washington, D.C. and showed up outside the White House. He entered a restricted area and was asked by the Secret Service to step out. Travis then claimed that he had a meeting with the president. The Secret Service told him that he needed to sign up for a tour to be let into the White House. He did not comply with the agent's orders and remained in the restricted area. Therefore, the Secret Service agents arrested him and took him to their headquarters. He was processed there and then released to await trial on a misdemeanor of unlawful entry. Travis declared himself a sovereign citizen and vowed to represent himself in this case. He returned home to Illinois, and weeks later, he came back to D.C. for his court date. D.C.'s Attorney General, Carl Rassin, negotiated a bargain with Travis and had him plead guilty to the charge. Associate Judge Marissa DeMio sentenced him to complete a program involving 32 hours of community service. In November 2017, the case was dismissed as he successfully completed the program. He was prohibited from possessing any firearms for the next 3 years. Therefore, 4 rifles he owned were confiscated by the Tazewell County Sheriff's Office in Illinois. However, his father Jeffrey requested to keep those guns. The office had him sign an agreement in order to promise not to give those guns back to Travis. After the agreement was made, the guns were given to father Jeffrey Reinking. However, Jeffrey did not follow the rules. He gave the guns back to Travis anyways. Travis then left the state of Illinois. He temporarily settled in Salida, Colorado, and got a job as a crane operator. However, he was fired for causing a scene by accusing the workers of stalking him. The decision to fire him was understandable and very smart. I can't imagine how stressful it must have been for those co-workers to have to deal with this. Where I am from, in a number of places, those people would have been fired even if the allegation was false. Travis then moved away to Nashville, Tennessee. He got another job as a crane worker there, but never returned. In his apartment, he filmed himself discussing how he believed people were breaking into his home and stalking him. At a motel in the nearby town of Alcoa, Travis entered a family's room without permission and expressed erratic behavior. The cops were called, but Travis had not done anything super bad, so once again there were no arrests nor charges. Then Travis visited a Nashville car dealership and went on a test ride. He had been trying out one of their Kias. Travis never returned the Kia, which led to the car dealership calling the cops to report a theft. The car was then found parked at his apartment complex's parking lot and returned to the dealership. For whatever reason, Travis wasn't arrested. He was literally inside his apartment and no action was taken. The police department would ultimately regret not making this arrest. You will shortly learn why. On April 22nd, 2018, 2 days after 420, Travis Reinking drove to a Waffle House at 4 a.m. in Antioch, Tennessee. He came out of his vehicle almost naked, only wearing a green jacket. Armed with an AR-15 rifle, he opened fire. Travis shot 2 people in the parking lot who died at the scene. He then started shooting up the restaurant from the outside. Travis then entered the restaurant, shot two people, killing one instantly and injuring the other one, who died later at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Then an electrician rushed over to Travis and disarmed him. The gun went off, shooting the electrician in the leg. Travis then fled the scene, and the chaos was over. The electrician and four other injured victims were taken to the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. As I recently mentioned, one of them died there. The others were treated and released from the hospital weeks later. The three remaining victims who died at the scene were taken to the Davidson County Coroner's Office. Travis was identified through his vehicle's license plate, and a manhunt for him would start. But what truly sets this shooting apart from other similar tragedies is the history of warning signs that had been ignored, years of disturbing behavior that could have, and perhaps should have, led to an earlier intervention. Reinking's apparent lack of empathy and his utter disregard for human life paints a clear picture of the dangerous path he was on for years. His violent outburst at the Waffle House restaurant was simply the culmination of years of troubling behavior. The four deceased victims were identified as 21-year-old Diebony Groves, 23-year-old Aquila da Silva, 29-year-old Taurian Sanderlin, and 20-year-old Joe Perez Jr. Diebony's funeral services were held at the First Baptist Church in Gallatin. Visitation on the 27th of April and Mass on the 28th. She was afterwards buried at the cemetery of the Crestview Funeral Home. For Aquila, there was a viewing on March 4th at the New Generation Funeral Home in Antioch. Family visitation the following day at the Olive Branch Church in Nashville, followed by a celebration of life here later on in that day, at the same place. He was afterwards buried at the Christ Church Memorial Gardens of Nashville. Taurian services were held at the Sac Funeral Home in Nashville on April 27th, both visitation and celebration of life. He was afterwards cremated, and the ashes were given to his family. Lastly, there was a visitation held for Joe on the 30th of April at the Harrell Funeral Home in Kyle, Texas. There was also a rosary session held there. The following day, he was cremated, and the ashes were given to his family. On May 1st, a Mass for him was held at the St. Anthony's Catholic Church. Now, let's continue discussing the shooter, Travis Reinking. About 3 days after the shooting, construction workers spotted him walking and called the cops. He was apprehended by authorities, but not before leading them on a terrifying chase through the woods. His capture brought little comfort to those who had lost loved ones in that senseless attack. After the arrest was made, Travis was processed at the headquarters of the Davidson County Sheriff's Office and then booked into their jail pending charges. Authorities chose not to charge him for the car theft, as that crime was minor compared to the shooting. The following day, Travis appeared before Judge Marcus Floyd at the Justice Birch Building in Nashville and was granted a $2 million bail that he was unable to pay off. Judge Floyd set this bail to make sure he would not be able to leave jail, due to him being a flight risk to society. This bail was shortly after revoked by District Judge Mark Fishburne, who ordered that he remain at the Davidson County Jail without bond. Tennessee prosecutor Jan Norman presented the shooting case to a grand jury at the Davidson County Criminal Court. This grand jury indicted Travis Reinking on 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder, 6 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 4 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. After Norman unsealed this indictment, Travis was arraigned by Magistrate Allegra Walker and pleaded not guilty to all charges. Travis Reinking's story serves as a tragic reminder of the dangers of ignoring the warning signs of a deeply troubled individual. From his early delusions to his violent tendencies, his actions were eerily predictable, but it was a lack of proper intervention from family, law enforcement, and mental health services that allowed him to spiral out of control, ultimately leading to the shooting at the Waffle House. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation identified who was responsible. They were Travis's father, Jeffrey Reinking, the city of Nashville, their Metropolitan Police Department, and Tazewell County, Illinois. Therefore, 4 federal lawsuits and 1 civil lawsuit were filed against them. 2 against Jeffrey Reinking, 1 against the city of Nashville, 1 against the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department, and 1 against Tazewell County, Illinois. Against Jeffrey for being involved in the injuries and deaths of the victims for unlawfully returning the guns to Travis. Against Nashville for not supervising Travis when he moved to their city. Against their police department for not arresting him after the car theft, to put him in custody before he'd be able to commit the shooting. And against Tazewell County for giving the guns to Jeffrey to give to Travis. The Tazewell County Sheriff's Office were made aware of Jeffrey's violation of their agreement not to return the guns to Travis. Therefore, he would be tied to a criminal probe within the state of Illinois. The state's prosecutor, Kevin Johnson, presented this case to a grand jury. Jeffrey Reinking was then indicted on a charge of unlawful delivery of a firearm. Prosecutor Johnson then appointed one of his fellow attorneys, Stuart Unholtz, to take care of the case. After the indictment was unsealed in March 2019, Jeffrey Reinking surrendered to the headquarters of the Tazewell County Sheriff's Office with his attorney, Joe Brown, and he was processed. He then immediately went to court to appear before duty judge Catherine Gorman. Jeffrey was then granted permission to remain out of custody to await trial. Later in 2019, Jeffrey settled one of the federal lawsuits outside of court. Then, in the beginning of 2020, he settled another civil lawsuit outside of court. Therefore, only 3 lawsuits remained. Meanwhile, Travis was evaluated at the Middle Tennessee Mental Health Institute. There, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. At the hospital, Travis drew out scenes from the shooting and even included the N-word in the drawings, as most of the victims were black. An opportunity for an insanity defense was granted to him by the end of 2020. In early 2021, the federal lawsuit against Tazewell County was dismissed, as the county was no longer declared responsible for having the guns returned to Travis. Only Jeffrey was responsible this time. Then, in the summer of 2021, the Nashville City Hall agreed to settle the lawsuit against their police department. Later that year, they settled the last lawsuit against the city itself. In 2022, it was time for Travis to go to trial. The case had been delayed for years as the prosecutor and defense attorneys had changed. The new prosecutor was Glenn Funk. Funk then appointed another prosecutor, Roger Moore. Funk announced that his team would seek a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Travis's first attorney was John Ween from the Public Defender's Office. However, Ween then got replaced by 2 private attorneys, Luke Evans and Paul Bruno. On the first day of the trial, Travis changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial lasted days. Its 12-person jury ultimately found Travis Reinking guilty on all charges. The trial would continue on for a sentencing phase to decide whether Travis would be granted parole or not. The jury shortly after denied having Travis be given parole. Therefore, he was immediately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The last steps of the case would be delayed as the parties were preparing to have Travis be sentenced on the other charges. Meanwhile, Travis appealed his guilty verdict and life sentence for the murder charges. He was temporarily housed at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex for an evaluation period to decide what his official prison would be. It was then time for his father, Jeffrey Reinking, to go to trial after several failed attempts to dismiss his indictment. In May 2022, Tazewell County Judge Chris Daskutch adjudicated Jeffrey Reinking guilty of his firearms charge after a bench trial. He would now await sentencing out of custody. Jeffrey then changed attorneys. He had Kevin Sullivan represent him to start his appeals process. In June of that year, Travis Reinking was sentenced to an additional 114 years in prison for his remaining charges, the attempted murder and firearms crimes. In March 2023, his father, Jeffrey Reinking, was sentenced to 18 months in prison. However, he would be allowed to remain out of custody until a decision for his appeal was made. 2 months later, all of the appeals for Travis got rejected. In June of that year, Jeffrey surrendered to the Tazewell County Jail to start his sentence. He was afterwards admitted into the Illinois River Correctional Institution in Canton to finish his sentence. In May 2024, Jeffrey's appeal was rejected as well. As of 2025, Jeffrey has been released from prison, and Travis is serving his sentence at his permanent facility, the Monroe County Correctional Complex. Thank you for joining me today on Strawberry Ink. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues, please reach out. As always, take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time, goodbye.